For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Shannon de Rehove. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, in some press reports, it's been suggested that the focus on Nkandla is removing some attention from even more important issues, such as the economic crisis. Why do you say this?
What I think it's true that when Parliament is paralysed, when government is preoccupied with Nkandla, it makes it more difficult to have serious discussion about some matters that are affect the future and the long-term development of this country. In the one report by Craig Dodds in the Sunday Independent, he refers to the IMF forecasting that growth in South Africa will be 1.4%, as it has been for about 3 years, according to him. Now, that is one of those things that must be attended to. There are a number of other things. There's the violence, there's the lack of adequate sanitation, power outages, a range of these things. And I think we've got to ask ourselves, where is the problem? Nkandla can't go away because Nkandla is not being addressed by the parties who are supposed to address it. In that same report to which I'm referring, it is said there are about 7 different reports, if you count the President's response, about 7 different reports on Nkandla. Now, the main obligation the President has is to answer questions from the public protector, not necessarily to pay back the money. In fact, the President is free to say that I do not believe that I am liable to pay back this money for the following reasons. And Parliament may endorse that. And then the question really becomes, how does the public protector and Parliament go forward from here? And it seems to me that that's not even possible to explore, because the public protector is dependent on an answer. That answer may well be that we don't believe that the case that you have made in your report is adequate, and the way forward may well be that we have this matter referred to the Constitutional Court or some other way. But the evidence that we have seen is that there are a number of questions that have been put to the President, and the President has not even bothered to answer these. Now, the result of this is that you've got a wholesale breakdown of processes in Parliament. The Nkandla Committee is the ANC sitting on its own. You've got disciplinary proceedings and a number of other things. So when one says there are more important things than Nkandla, I don't think that we should have a hierarchy and say this is the most important thing, because if the Constitution is being undermined, that is very, very important, and I wouldn't like to say it's less important or more important than the economy. You can't run a constitutional democracy unless you abide by the rules of that constitutional democracy.
How then do we break the impasse?
See, I think that we have to do some sort of inventory of the multiple crises that we are facing at the moment, and acknowledge that there is actually a democratic crisis in this country, that the democracy that was inaugurated in 1994, which was supposed to be run in a particular way as a multi-party democracy, observing certain constitutional norms, is not functioning. Well, in some ways it's hardly functioning at all, because the notion of a multi-party democracy obviously is has an element of fiction when the ANC is the most overwhelming party. And from the beginning, the ANC was able to put through whatever it wanted to do, and the debate was a little bit of form and gesture rather than substance. What I think has happened now, which has put multi-party democracy to the test, is that the EFF comes from the same constituency as the ANC, and whether or not they have put policies before the public that are realizable, practical, well thought out, and all that, when they say pay back the money, when they say that Marikana was a murder of people, they're actually evoking feelings that a lot of people have. Now, if the DA does not speak for the poor and the wounded in general, we already see last week in the report of the Social Justice Coalition, the way they treat the people with the toilets in Cape Town shows that they don't really have, they can't pretend to be speaking for them. Now, I'm not suggesting that the EFF is necessarily a genuine representative of the poorest of the poor. But when they raise these issues that concern taxpayers in general, not only the poorest of the poor, but the public in general, they evoke a lot of sympathy. There are people who believe that Parliament must do its work, that Parliament must be handled, must be run with decorum, that you shouldn't be putting the middle finger, and all these sorts of things. But they nevertheless have a guarded appreciation for the way in which the EFF has put the ANC on the spot. Now, they put the ANC on the spot because they knew what bells to ring. They knew what would strike a chord with the ANC's constituency, and they knew what would put the ANC on the defensive. So this has created a crisis. Instead of having statesmanship and negotiations in order to find a way of accommodating all parties and ensuring that multipartyism remained in place, the ANC brought disciplinary proceedings. First of all, strong-arm stuff in Parliament, but then disciplinary proceedings. And also with the Nkandla report, they were prepared to go ahead without the opposition. Now, when they do that, any semblance of legitimacy disappears. Now, when you have people outvoted, you have gone through a constitutional process that is recognizable as multipartyism. When you just go through as an ANC committee, it has next to no credibility. Equally, when they put this disciplinary proceedings together, one asks, was it necessary to go to this point? Couldn't they have tried to talk to the EFF and have a working agreement? When we understand this has happened, can we have some undertaking that in future you will observe the rules of Parliament, or if there is some part of the rules that you would like amended, let's discuss that. But for us to operate in Parliament, are you prepared to abide by some norms? Because if you're not prepared to abide by some norms, we have to rethink the how we can engage without putting you on discipline. But instead, they just charged them. And the case that Malema put there for ANC being judge, jury, and whatever it is, was fairly coherent.
Thank you very much for your insight.
Thank you.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about whether South Africa is facing a democratic crisis.